of the paralytic and what it means for us. We move from paralysis, no matter where we are, to being part of the joy of the feast where Jesus is, and Jesus is the bridegroom. Second thing I'd like to spend a bit of time in is the structure of chapter 10, the missionary discourse. It's a very difficult chapter. The opening instruction fits in well with the story so far. Don't take with you this and that and whatever. But then come warnings about persecutions and trials before Sanhedrins and all that. Well, of course, the early disciples are not going to encounter that. That sounds more like the early Christians as they move through the decades after Jesus, when the Christians were struggling in their mission to Israel. So how is this chapter all put together? Well, I'm going to use another word. We've learnt the word triad a little bit. Now I want you to learn about chiastic order. Chiastic. C-H-I-A-S-T-I-C. Because Matthew has crafted in an incredible way this chapter, as indeed many other things have been crafted. And if we really need to understand chapter 10, we've got to understand that it's put together in a chiastic order way. Which means this: there's a match between the first episode he's speaking about and the last. The second and the second last. The third and the third last. And then the centre is the key to understanding the whole thing. You can't really understand any by itself. You must see the pattern and understand it all from what's central. So, let's take a little bit of a look and we'll see that the first and the last sections are all about welcome and acceptance. Whatever town or village you enter, ask for someone trustworthy and stay with them. If anybody doesn't welcome you, etc., etc. And the last, anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. The second section and the second last section all talk about persecution and family conflict. Brother will betray brother. You'll be handed over to Sanhedrins. Second section. Don't suppose I've come to bring peace on earth. Anyone who prefers father or mother to me isn't worthy of me. The second last section. And the third section and third last section relate Christian suffering to Christ himself. The disciple isn't superior to the master. So we'll have sufferings too. If anyone declares himself for me in the presence of men, I will declare myself for him in the presence of the Father in heaven. So declaring yourself, a hard thing to do in persecutions. Jesus will look after us. So, what's the central element about? Okay, that is all about the grounds we have for being confident. The Father who cares even for sparrows puts a higher premium on us, people of faith. Okay, now I want to look at just a couple of things in chapter 10 now. We know where the movement of the whole chapter is and where the central defining pericope is. Pericope is the word for a little section in a gospel. First off though, before I look at that, I want to look briefly at chapter 9 verses 35 to 37. And this is really just before chapter 10, but it sets the tone for it. And when he saw the crowds, Jesus felt sorry for them, because they were harassed and dejected, like sheep without a shepherd. Wow. It's a rather beautiful moment we're at, that particular verse. Jesus felt sorry for them. Now the word in Greek, which I was going to say but I think I might get stuck on, means something like being moved in the pit of your stomach with compassion. So it's a very physical, you're overcome with deep compassion for somebody or something. And it's very rare that we find it in Matthew's Gospel, but it happens a few times that Jesus is deeply moved. And they're very significant moments. We're meant to really pay attention when we read that. He's deeply moved by ordinary people, ordinary mums and dads and single people and young and all of that. Because they are harassed and they're dejected. Who's harassing them? Why are they dejected? Because of their leaders. Their leaders, the Pharisees and the scribes, are laying burdens on them. They're like sheep without a shepherd. That's an interesting phrase. We can find it way back in the book of Numbers, chapter 27, verse 17, where we find that Moses is preparing for his death, and he thinks of what he's going to do to keep the faith still going, because otherwise people are going to be like sheep without a shepherd. So he's preparing to give Joshua the leadership of his people. Joshua, a word meaning Jesus, same word really. So when we read that, sheep without a shepherd, and perhaps we might be thinking, if we're Jewish, of that phrase from the book of Numbers, we're also thinking of Jesus preparing to die and passing on to his disciples. The fact that they're to be good shepherds now, just as Jesus is the good shepherd. And then, just after this, Jesus chooses the 12. The 12 is a significant thing in Matthew. That reminds us of the 12 tribes of Israel a little bit. Why 12? Why not 13? Why not 12? The 12 tribes. And that's a very significant biblical number. And therefore, there's a sense that, hey, perhaps he's beginning the new people of God, founded on these new 12. Okay, now we'll move a little bit into a couple of sections only of this chapter 10. I just want to look at two of them. The first is the first section, chapter 10, verses 5 to 15. That's the first section there. Notice how closely the instructions that Jesus gives to his disciples as they're about to go out on mission parallel the activity of Jesus himself. Proclaim the good news of the kingdom, cure the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons. And as Jesus did, they're to go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So they're to proclaim the good news to their fellow Jews. And they're to pass on this good news without any worry about who's going to pay me anything. No, there's no sense of that. We give freely. And they're to travel lightly, not to take extra clothing and baggage and suitcases and all that. They're going to be looked after. So they're going to go in the freedom and simplicity and joy of the good news. A little bit like the poverty of the Beatitudes. An extraordinary thing. And whenever we read that, even today, that's all we go with, the good news. Fundamentally, that's all we go with. We don't want any recompense. We don't want extra baggage with us. All we want is the beauty and the simplicity of the good news. And speak from that, as Matthew would always say, it's always from our hearts. We offer the gift of peace, of shalom. Now we'll look at the central section. This is the heart of it all. This has just followed the section on persecution. And now what Jesus is saying is have no fear. Have no fear. He's already said to us,